Alright everyone, it is time for another Master Mentorship video, and we are going to start here with a game that Steve sent me. Welcome to the program, Steve, and you have the black pieces in this game. And this was a 45-45 game. That's definitely a good time control, plenty of time there, and good practice with live chess versus only playing daily or correspondence chess. So let's take a look. So you've got the black pieces, e4, e5. Okay, we get a Scotch 4 knights game, takes, bishop b4, takes. You give that an in. Is that on purpose, or are you saying that's a novelty? Usually an in means novelty. It's a move that's never been played before, but I don't think that's true, is it? Yeah, this is the main line. It's been played many times. Probably just a typo. That's okay. B takes c6, bishop d3, and castles. Yeah, so far you're playing just fine. You said you felt good here. I do too. I think black's doing all right. So let's see. Castles, d5. Takes, queen f3. I think this is all theory, isn't it? I don't play this line with either color, but I'm pretty sure this is all theory. And then c6, bishop g5. And I thought here black often just retreats to e7. This is kind of as far as my knowledge in this line goes, so I'm going to go ahead and check with the database. But I thought bishop takes c3 was a move, but also bishop e7 was an alternative. Looks like bishop e7 is the most popular. Hardly anyone plays bishop takes c3. That's kind of surprising. Bishop d6 has been played. I'm curious why no one plays bishop takes c3, but I guess the problem is, when you take on c3, now you have no way to avoid double pawns around your king. Right? There's no way to break this pin, and there's no way to stop white from just playing bishop takes f6 next turn, followed by maybe queen h5 or something, really going after the h7 pawn. So let's see your comment here. This is interesting. You thought about a comment in my video about taking every knight, and it looked like I would have better center pawns, so I did. Oh, you're talking about the video I made in Module 1 talking about how I didn't consider bishop takes knight enough, and that was one of my goals as an expert pushing towards master. Yeah, that's true. That definitely means you should consider the move, but that doesn't mean you can just play the move with no calculation. So when you took on c3, were you saying, okay, so I'm going to take, white's going to take back, and now let's really assess this position. What's going on here? What would I play? Because I think if you do that, it kind of becomes clear it's pretty hard to play this position with black. There's no way to address this pin. So that's probably why most players here just play bishop back to e7, just breaking the pin. And you get this interesting position where black has kind of this space advantage in the center, but black also has 3 pawn islands, and white can try to soften you up with c4 at some point, and it's hard to avoid getting an isolated pawn somewhere. Plus, of course, white has a slight lead in development for the time being. But yeah, bishop takes c3 looks pretty dangerous to me. B takes c3, and now simply rook e8. So you decided you want the open file. That's good, but were you doing any concrete calculation? Surely you had to assess what happens on bishop takes f6, right? That's definitely a check, capture, or threat. We know before you play any move in chess ever, you always have to look for the opponent's checks, captures, threats. So I'm wondering what your thoughts were there, or if you were scared of this. Although I guess you can take with the queen. I don't know why I didn't consider that option earlier. I guess this might be okay. And we just get this kind of in-game position where, both sides have doubled pawns. So maybe this is playable for white. I'm not too sure why black has to avoid this, or why no one goes for this. Just coming back here to check again. So takes. Let's say rook e8 like in the game. Takes. You would take with the queen, probably. Takes. I don't think this is so bad for black. I think white might be a bit better, though, but it's probably not anything too horrible. Just some thoughts there about how you can think about this opening, but maybe you can go for this. I just feel like it's very hard to play this for a win with black. I think white has the better chances. But okay, let's see the game. Enough of the opening stuff. So bishop f5, interesting. That allows you to play takes, and rook e6. So I'm not too sure why white would want to go for that. They just traded off their good bishop on d3 for your undeveloped bishop on c8, so that doesn't make too much sense. A lot of players at this rating level just love, making exchanges, so that's probably why. Let's see, rook 8 to e1, queen e7, I think that's going to make sense, because if they trade, they can't immediately come to e1 with the other rook. The only concern is you could get this isolated, or not an isolated pawn, but kind of a backwards pawn on e6. Something like takes, queen takes, pawn takes, and then rook e1. But I think there you would just play king f7, and you're probably fine. In fact, you're probably better there. You have a better pawn structure than white. And it looks like that's what happens in the game. So we get this position, f3, And okay, we're in this endgame. So with all those opening considerations and middle game considerations out of the way, it looks like this game's going to be decided in the endgame. And I agree with you. You thought you had a good center here. You definitely do. Black is better here. In fact, black is probably much better here. Black has a better pawn structure. Black can easily play king f7. Rook b8 could be played this turn and control the only open file, and it definitely should be. And you play it. Good job. And you lost this game, so I'm going to be giving you some good feedback here on this endgame, because black definitely shouldn't lose this position. So let's see what happened. So rook e1, king f7. You've played just about perfectly so far this game. I know I had some minor criticisms there in the opening, just about your thought process a little bit, but this is really good for black. I also think this is the kind of position where the knight might end up better than the bishop, just because of white's targets here. You could target a pawn on a light square, and the bishop can't dislodge you. The knight could come to c4 at some point. The bishop can't dislodge you. Black is much better. So, okay, a4, rook b2, good. Rook e2, you're tying down the rook. This is great. Now, I guess if I was black here, I would probably play... I'm thinking I might play like knight d7, thinking about coming to c5 to target this isolated pawn, maybe to a4 to target this pawn. White just has so many targets here, and they can't really target my pawns at all. The bishop's just not very effective here. You played rook a2, that's also reasonable. Looks like that wins a pawn immediately. G4, okay, that's just total desperation by white. You take on a4, bishop d2, good. Okay, marching your passed pawn, all makes sense to me. Bishop e3, so you said here you're not sure how to press your advantage. Well, it would help me if you told me what you were thinking about. Like, are you just saying you kind of threw your hands up in the air and you're like, I have no clue what to do? Or what were some of your thoughts about how to press this advantage? But to help you out, I can tell you how I would think about a position like this. So I'm up a pawn in an endgame. I have a better pawn structure. I have a passed pawn. This is enough to have a clearly winning advantage with black. Now, in the modules, I talk about some questions you can ask yourself when you're not sure what to do, and one of them is, what's my worst placed piece and how can I improve it? And here that's definitely the knight, right? And hopefully you had that feeling too. This knight does nothing on f6. It's totally locked out from the action, but this knight could be a very effective piece somewhere, and I think knight d7 is kind of on the right track if you're playing that move for the right reasons. Now that said, this bishop kind of dominates the knight for now, but maybe you could even come to e5 next turn. There's not a very good discovery here. White doesn't have any discoveries here on the knight, so that could be worth considering. Then you just come to c4, and that's either going to help you push the passed pawn, or it's going to help you target the c2 pawn. You have lots of plans here. You can target the isolated pawns, you can push your passed pawn, you could even play e5 in some cases and gain more space. Black has lots of ways to push the advantage. But let's see, king g2, rook a1 I don't understand. You give it without comment. What's the purpose of the rook being on a1 now? The target's on c2. Why are we removing the target, or removing our pressure from the target? King g3, a4. Okay, I see. You just want to push the passed pawn. That makes sense. Although, again, I would love to get this knight involved. You have to get all the pieces involved, especially when you only have 3 of them on the board, right? You don't want your knight sitting here doing nothing. Bring it to c4 or something. That's going to do a great job there. c4. Okay. Yeah, that's why I would have liked to stop white from playing a move like that. That's a very good pawn sacrifice by white. Because now we can win a second pawn, but then we're going to have all the split up pawns. And now white got rid of their weakness. So, okay, a3, bishop d4, rook b1, rook e3. Okay, a2, rook a3. So I feel like, how can you give all these moves with no comment? Because this is a huge change in the evaluation of the position. Something big just happened, and you don't give any thoughts about what you're calculating. Like, were you calculating white's chances to come over here and surround the pawn? Because you have to, right? There's no way you can just not calculate that. You always have to look for all the checks, captures, threats. So don't give me a bunch of moves with no comments when something big is happening, right? This is a big event. I want to know what you're thinking and what you're calculating. Now, if it's true you're going to lose this pawn, you still want to sell it as dearly as possible. So I'm sure there's time to pick up one or both of the c-pawns, for example, if white's going to go after your a-pawn. But I don't think you even have to allow this. Like, did you calculate moves like c5? Because you have to, right? It's a check, capture, or threat. You have to calculate this. So why not play c5? Or sorry, it's, I guess you don't have time here. Rook e3. Why not play here c5? And I think this is very good for you, if I'm not mistaken. So after c5, the problem is this bishop has no squares. Right? It can't go here, here, here. If it goes here, then d4. And it can't go here or here. So I'm pretty sure c5 just wins immediately and white just resigns. And I don't see how it's possible to not look at this move because it's a check, capture, or threat. And you know that you always have to look at checks, captures, threats. But again, you played this A2 move with no comment. I'm wondering how fast you played that move. You can let me know either in the Facebook group or by email. But this is 45-45, so I'm hoping you still had some time on the clock. Just some things to think about there. I feel like you did a really, really good job there early in the game of being concrete, but it kind of slipped away from you a little bit here. And that's okay. It takes a while to build up these patterns of always being concrete, always asking for checks, captures, threats. You're definitely headed in the right direction. You just have to make sure it's a habit and you do it every single turn without exception. Because C5 just wins. But okay, A2 here, E5, okay, E4, okay. And here you mentioned D4. Yeah, I think D4 is once again pretty strong. The bishop just doesn't have a square. You think that D4 is the most obvious move, but of course I missed it. So, if you're going to tell me you missed a move, one thing I've always kind of harped on to all of our students, don't just tell me you missed something, tell me why you think you missed it. You're right, D4 is an obvious move, so why did you miss it? Don't just tell me you missed it. Were you playing too fast? Did you think E4 was really good, so you just kind of played it without too much calculation? I want to know exactly what was happening in your head when you missed D4, so that I can help you fix it and have it not happen again. And that's important for you to think about too. That's probably more important for you to think about and for you to put into words and writing than it is for me to tell you. Because a lot of players do this. They kind of chalk up their losses to, okay, this move was a blunder. But that's not enough. You have to say, okay, why did I make this blunder? What went wrong in my thought process? How can I make sure it doesn't happen again? E4 to me doesn't make much sense. We're just going to get another weak pawn here on E4, I think. Okay, rook takes A2... E3, okay, making another pass pawn. I thought white would just take and play like king f4 or something. But okay, let's see how this goes. Rook a1, okay, and you take. That seems like a big decision to me to exchange rooks, and you give it with no comment. Surely you had to weigh the pros and cons of exchanging, right? So why aren't you telling me, what those pros and cons are? Takes. Right, like how can you play this with no comment? It just loses a pawn. Are you in time trouble or something, or what's going on? I feel like, you kind of got frustrated, your position got worse all of a sudden, and it's like you've mentally given up, because I'm sure you can see that E2 does not work, there's just king f2 and you lose the pawn. So, I'm just curious what's going on in your thought process, and you're not telling me. You're giving tons of moves with no comments. Okay, here, takes. Okay, blundering the g7 pawn, yeah, that was just careless. I feel like it's been careless for a while, though. That's kind of, a symptom of a bigger cause here of your thought process. And here, probably white's better. White's up a pawn, and black has double pawns. So let's see. King d5, c3, knight e5. Well, you cannot go to the king and pawn endgame. You can't go to the king and pawn endgame in this situation. White has a 3-on-2 on the king side, and you give this move with no comment. I don't think you're understanding how big of a decision it is to go to the king and pawn endgame here, or to offer white the chance to go to the king and pawn endgame. Anytime you're either choosing to go to the king pawn endgame, or you're giving your opponent the chance to go to the king and pawn endgame, that's a very serious decision to make, because once you're in a king and pawn endgame, there's no ambiguity anymore. The king and pawn endgame is either a win, a loss, or a draw. There's no such thing as better or worse. So I think here it's pretty easy to see it's just a win for white, so you can't go for it. Why not try to keep the game complicated? I know it's still lost for black, but why not try? Why not play, I don't know, knight c5, knight a4, bring the king back? It's still lost, of course, but don't go to the king pawn endgame. So let's see. Okay, white's making this look very difficult, but it's still winning for white, I think. Okay. All right. Yeah, so overall you played very well. I just feel like all of a sudden you stopped being concrete. You stopped looking for checks, captures, or threats at all. And you mentioned a couple moments where you messed up. You didn't play d4, you totally forgot the g7 pawn, but it started before that. You didn't calculate white's ideas to come after your a pawn. You didn't calculate c5, which would have just won on the spot. So don't feel bad, just really make sure you're focusing on this in the next week. Whenever you play a game, every single turn, checks, captures, threats, both yours and your opponent's. And just be a bit more specific there in telling me your thought process. Don't just say I made a mistake, really be specific about what caused it so I can help you out better. But I hope that helps. Let me know, of course, if you have any questions. Next up, we've got a member versus member game. This is Brenda versus Bruce. And this is annotated by Brenda. So let's take a look from her perspective here with the white pieces. d4, knight f6, c4. You're not sure if sticking to the queen's gambit was the right thing. Well, it's not a queen's gambit. And that's a minor thing, but I have to correct you when you say that, because this is how a lot of players think about openings. They don't think of an opening as a specific position. They think about it as, just moves they're making. d4, d5, c4 is the queen's gambit. If black doesn't play d5, it's not a queen's gambit. But c4 is the right move, but you have to know other openings besides the queen's gambit here. But we'll get into that in the later modules. Don't worry about that too much right now. But c4 is the most ambitious move, so that's a good move. e6, knight f3. You're thinking you should have pushed the pawn. No, you don't want to push the pawn too early. You have to get your pieces into the game. d5 takes. I disagree with taking there. I don't really see the purpose. And you give it with no comment. Again, too many moves being given with no comment in all of these games for the most part. Some players give comments on every move, but most of you don't. So really be more specific about the moves you're making and explain the thought process, because that's going to help you guys too. So when you take on d5, you're just helping black open up their bishop, right? So why do it? Why not just defend this pawn or something with e3 so you can defend it? But okay, takes. Not the end of the world, just a minor criticism. Knight c3, c5, bishop d2. I don't understand. The bishop doesn't seem good there at all. You should have went to f4 or g5. Again, can you tell me more about why you think that now and why you didn't think about it during the game? I'm not like trying to harp on. I'm just trying to understand what happened after the game that changed your mind from during the game. There's really only about like 3 more annotations the whole game, so I really want you guys to be a lot more specific in the annotations. But let's see here. Bishop d2, knight d7, e3. Okay, so this is almost like the pawn structure from the Tarrasch defense, where after these pawns get exchanged, black ends up with this isolated pawn on d5. And if you haven't made it that far in the material yet, Brenda, don't feel bad. That's covered in Module 3, and you definitely should be focused on the Module 2 material right now. But later on, we talk about the implications of this isolated d-pawn and how you can use that to kind of formulate a plan. But so far, you're making safe moves. That's good. I don't want you to feel like you're playing, bad here. You're definitely playing all safe moves, and that's good. Bishop d3, rook e8, rook e1. You thought about knight g5 and queen g4 and h takes g5? I'm not sure what you mean. So you thought about knight g5, queen g4. This doesn't seem possible. There's a bishop, there's a knight. The plan is going to be about this isolated d-pawn, or the eventual isolated d-pawn. So I feel like you're having trouble coming up with a plan here, which I don't blame you at all, because we haven't talked about planning yet. But again, the moves are safe, so I don't have too much to criticize. Knight e4, knight takes d5. Again, this seems like a pretty significant thing to calculate. How can it be given with no comments? Takes. b5. So you should be happy here, right? You're up a pawn. That's a good thing. b3, e4. I don't understand. So what's wrong with taking your pawn back? I'm not sure what's going on. And again, I'm not sure how you can give up with no comment. Knight f6. Now you take back. Now you lose a pawn. You should have stacked your rooks by this point. So I don't feel like you're really caring that much that you just lost a pawn back. Okay. Knight f5, bishop e4, and you give the rest of the game with no comments as you blunder a rook in the corner. Is that right? Okay. All right. So please be a lot more specific with the comments. I can't help you out as good as I could if you're only going to give like 4 annotations for the whole game. As you said in the Facebook group, Brenda, I saw your comment about not being concrete and how you're not really looking for checks, captures, threats every turn, just like this bishop takes a1 move. That's okay. Like I always say, don't feel bad. It takes a long time to build up this pattern, or this kind of mental pattern of how you think in a chess game. The important thing is to try. And you'll make mistakes at first. That's okay, but you have to at least try it. So next time you send me a game, please, every single turn, I want to see all the checks, captures, threats you were considering, and your rationale for the move you made. I know that sounds kind of like overkill, but it's going to help you out, trust me. If you're forced to think about every single move, your checks, captures, threats, and you can't just add it in after the game. These have to actually be things you were thinking about during the game. So if you want, you can have a notepad with you, you can take notes as you play every single turn. Whatever it takes, make sure you get in the habit of doing this every single move. Because there's no way you should blunder something like bishop takes a1 in a correspondence game, right? There's no time limit. If you're looking every turn for checks, captures, threats, there's just no way you ever miss a move like that. It just wouldn't happen. All right, next up, you've got a game here from Jerome. And I know you said that you won this game, and you don't usually send games that you won, but you wanted to kind of show me your great redemption here. You've shown me some brutal in-game losses, and this time you've said you prevailed in a king and pawn in-game. So let's just take a look at this real quick and see how you improved here. So d4, c6. Okay, that's an interesting move. I don't really see the need to play that on move 1, Because now the problem is why I don't like this move order, and I play the Caro-Kann and the Slav myself, right? So if anyone would play this move, it would be me. But if you play this move, what if white goes for the London system here? What if white plays like knight f3, bishop f4? Now you can't play like the ambitious lines against the London with the early c5. So I don't see a need to play this. d5 is fine to play here on move 1, and then after c4 you can still play your Slav, and then you just stop e4 altogether. But it's playable, so let's see here. Okay, we get a Slav. Okay, bishop g5. Against this, I actually like to take on c4. I don't really like white getting this bishop out and defending the pawn. I don't like letting them play the bishop, to g5 and then e3 to defend c4. If they bring the bishop out, I kind of want to take on c4, but that's just my approach. You certainly can play this way. Only thing is here, white could just play e3, and I feel like it's kind of favorable for white. But taking on f6 doesn't seem reasonable to me at all. That kind of helps you out, and now black has the pair of bishops, just like you mentioned. Good job. e3, knight d7, c5. I don't feel like that's right. I feel like you have to castle first and kind of finish up your development. Especially because there's no knight on f6 to defend this d5 pawn. I'm just worried that white can take on d5 now. Yeah, the engine considered this a mistake. Looking now, maybe better was to develop the bishop instead of pin the knight. Okay, so the engine considered this move a mistake, and I don't think you really, put in the work to figure out why. And a lot of players do this. They just tell me, why is this move wrong? The engine doesn't like it. Can you help me, Blake? And I can, but it's very important to learn how to do this yourself, too. You can't be a master chess player if you just, shrug your shoulders every time the engine criticizes your move without figuring out why. And I'm not saying you have to, care every time the engine criticizes you. A lot of times, especially the chess.com engine, it's complete garbage in a lot of positions. But here, this move's just not safe. It's not a matter of, well, maybe there was some better, positional plan. The move's just not safe. d5 is hanging. White has two attackers on d5. And I think if you would have played around with the engine a bit and tried to experiment with your ideas and seen, what the computer would play against you, it's not very hard to find that d5's hanging here. So I do wish you would have found that after the game in your annotations at the very least. But that's okay. It takes a while to get used to that. I kind of share my thoughts about, working with an engine in Module 2 a bit. But let's see. So white ignores it for some reason. They don't take on d5. You take on d4. They take back. And bishop b4. Okay, interesting. You decide to pin the knight. You thought that white would bring the queen to c2, but instead castles. Still not sure if I love giving white the chance to take on d5. I guess we'd end up with mutual isolated pawns, but okay. Castles. This is a cosmetic move, but I was prepared to give up my bishop pair to give white double pawns, okay. So in any case, we end up in this pawn structure here. The thing is, they're not really doubled pawns, not when you have the pawn on d5. If this was like a Nimzo Indian, and you have the pawns on d6 and c5, then sure, but this pawn can be traded off anytime white wants. So white doesn't really have doubled pawns. Knight b6, your remaining bishop now has a free square, okay, takes. So now we have kind of the isolated couple. Yeah, the hanging pawns, as you say. So you kind of have the more compact pawn structure. If you could play, bishop d7 and double on the c-file, then black's probably better. But white can probably play c4, start trying to gain space. It's just a matter of what can they do with it. So let's see. c4, knight c3. I'm not sure if they should have allowed that. Rook d8, d5. This move allowed you to exchange pawns and give white another isolated pawn. Yeah, I guess I kind of agree that that's not a great move, because it frees your bishop too. Probably not a great approach there by white. I think white should play probably one of the rooks somewhere, either rook d1, rook c1, rook e1. Always kind of hard to to assess all the options. But eventually white wants to play like knight e5 and attack on the king side, I think, and try to keep this bishop bad, and try to kind of mitigate your pressure on the central pawns. But yeah, d5, takes. Now you can just play bishop g4, right? Yep, good. You could have just taken the pawn. Can you, though? Isn't there a back rank situation here? I don't think you can take the pawn. So I guess you're lucky that, that you decided against that. But let's see. Bishop g4 here. Okay. You could just double their pawns, too. But I think this makes sense. Although, I don't know. Why not just rook d6 or something? I'm just thinking you can double on the d file and then go after doubling the pawns, then go after the d pawn. You do it to deflect the queen off the knight, but isn't there queen d3, which white plays in the game? Yeah, your basic idea was queen d2, but why would white play that? They can just play queen d3. Okay, queen f5. You want to encourage a queen trade. I mean, bishop takes f3 seems like a pretty easy way to encourage a queen trade to me. Queen f5, okay, at any rate they go for it. Bishop e4, and you did this with the expectation of the variation below. You expected knight g5, and then you could take on d5. Okay, that's a nice idea, exploiting the weak back rank. But again, you can't hope your opponent's going to make bad moves. You have to look for all their possibilities, and here they can just play king f1. So, okay. Bishop takes f3, takes. Is this a win for black? It's hard to tell. In a rook in game, my inclination is to say no. Probably white can defend this with best play. But then again, every white pawn is isolated. So I think black actually has pretty good chances in a practical game to play this for a win. So let's see. Rook d8. King g2. You march the king up. Okay, f5. You want to immobilize the pawn. Okay. Yeah, but now just rook e6, right? They're just going to come after your kingside pawns now. I don't think you really want to allow that. I don't know about h5. I think it's much easier for white to target the g6 pawn than the h7 pawn, especially if you want to march the king up. So after h5 here, I don't think you noticed rook e6 even after the game. You don't mention it in your notes. But okay, rook d3, that's totally passive, of course. You never want a passive rook in these rook in games. King c5, you win the pawn. Okay, that's horrible for white to exchange rooks there. Because you just have a clear 2-on-1 outside pawn majority. That's an instant win. So, again, you can't just go to these king and pawn endgames willy-nilly. You have to calculate them out, and I think your opponent didn't do that. So, let's see. You make a passed pawn, you deflect the king, you win all the pawns. Good. Good. Nice job. Nice. Nice win. Much better in the endgame this time. Keep it up. Of course, allowing rook e6 really could have, turned the tables there. So you always have to stay concrete, ask for all the checks, captures, threats. But overall, much better. Nice job, Jerome. All right, next up, a couple games here from Arne. So let's take a look. I love the detailed annotations here, by the way. Yeah, pretty much every move or every critical move seems to be thoroughly explained here. That's exactly what we're going for. So let's see here. You have the black pieces. Let's see how this goes. A casual 15-15. All right. So we get a Slav defense. Queen c2, interesting. Okay, e6. You don't like locking in the light bishop. Yeah, against queen c2, I think you can play bishop g4. Wow, queen c2 is so rare, there's almost no theory here. I would be tempted to maybe even take on c4 here and just play b5 and try to hold on to my pawn. Just because white's playing so strangely. Also here, because you haven't committed to e6 yet, even something like g6 makes sense. g6, so you can play bishop f5 in some cases, and then just bishop g7 castles. But okay, e6 is reasonable as well. And e4. Yeah, so white basically played to try to get this break in as soon as humanly possible, but I don't think this works out very well for them in this particular case. I'm pretty sure you just take on e4 here, and d4 is just hanging, right? And they might get some compensation, but I'm not sold on their chances after something like simply this, right? Doesn't seem so great for white at all. I think black would already be significantly better here as early as move 6. And of course they don't have to take back right away. Maybe their plan is after you take to play, I don't even know, bishop e3 to defend the pawn? I don't know, it seems pretty bad for white, very sketchy. Bishop b4, I don't like this move because it lets white get this move in for free. And I'm pretty sure they can just play e5. And I know you might want to play like knight e4 here. Maybe this is possible. Maybe you calculated this. I'm not sure if you give this specific line or if you considered e5, but I feel like this favors white. That's just kind of my gut instinct here. White's going to be able to deal with the pressure here on the c3 knight, and they just have this big space advantage, and seems pretty pleasant for white. But okay, bishop b4, you want to pin the knight so you can play knight takes e4, but they're not going to allow that, right? You have to understand, of course, white's not going to allow that. And you kind of criticize yourself for not being as concrete here. So let's see. How does white respond? Bishop d2. Well, now you can just take on c3 and take on e4, right? I don't think that's a good reaction here from white. And you kind of mentioned this. I think you just weren't being concrete. But it's a 15-15 game, so I guess there's not infinite time every turn. So let's see how this goes. So you castle. Now, okay, I was just going to think, is there a tactical problem here with knight takes d5? But there's not, because we can take with check, of course. So e5... Okay, takes, knight e4, f3, takes. Interesting. Yeah, I feel like white just has this big center here. And you mentioned the possibility of queen h4 after f3. Yeah, that's usually kind of an issue with with white playing f3 this early with the knight on e4. I guess you just weren't considering the checks captures threats here as concretely as you maybe could have been. But again, in a shorter time control game, it's hard to do that every single turn. Yeah, here it's pretty hard for white to find a good response here to queen h4, because on g3 you just take, and you have this pin. But okay, in the game, white gets this this big space advantage. Knight d7, bishop d3, and you just blunder the h7 pawn, right? If I'm not mistaken here. Common pattern, h pawn attack twice. Yeah, you have to defend it. You're bad. It's bad this bishop move didn't trigger the alarm bells. Yeah, it's already kind of hard to see how to play this, though. Like, if you play g6, I'm already worried white's just going to play h4, h5. And that looks pretty scary to me. I think maybe h6 is possible, but I think white's much better in any case. Your pieces are just pretty bad. And it'd be nice to have that dark bishop still on the board. I don't see what we gain by trading it off, because just like I said earlier in this video, when white has this this pawn tension here in the center, it doesn't mean much to double these pawns. White can get rid of their doubled pawns anytime they want, so there's no real incentive to double the pawns. Okay, c5 takes. They just bring the bishop back, and now probably white's just going to try to play queen f2, queen h4 or something. Maybe it's not that simple, because you watch over that square. But the king's very weak. Queen a5, well, I don't think the queen belongs on the queen side now. I think now white probably is just going to try to mate you. You were trying to play c takes d4. Okay, so there are some ideas here. Knight e2, takes. Well, now, wait a minute. Isn't e5 hanging now? You can take on c4 and then take on e5. And I don't think you mentioned this possibility. So lots of kind of pawn tension situations here in the center that are very complex, and you really have to assess all the implications of all the exchanges. Which, again, is hard to do in a 15-minute game. I'm not sure if knight e2 is the best reaction here from white. I think white should just make sure they can maintain their pawns and just play, I don't know, king f2, just so they can take back with the pawn. It's not like the king's weak on f2. You have no pieces doing anything. So I think the king's totally safe on the f2 square. But okay, in the game, knight e2 takes, they take with the knight, and now you missed d takes c4 and queen takes c5. You just played knight c5, you said your bishop is stuck, you want to bring your pieces into the game. Okay, you mentioned it. You missed the hanging pawn on e5. So you did see it after the game. Castles, bishop d7, knight b3, I guess kind of forcing you to exchange. Although, I don't know if you want to make the exchange, because that just helps white kind of consolidate their pawns a bit more and open their rook. Maybe just queen back to c7, and then if they take on c5, you take with check and win the c4 pawn, right? It's kind of a good thing to keep in mind there. Just because it looks like white's forcing this exchange, that doesn't mean you can't consider a move like queen c7. Takes, check, takes. You just undouble the pawns for them, though. I don't really see a huge benefit here, except you do win the e5 pawn. So maybe you calculated all that when you went for this line. Certainly good job fighting back. I feel like white played a bit strangely there, and definitely white's advantage is not what it once was. Material is once again equal, and with the reduced material on the board, the open king might not be as big of a concern. So let's see how this goes. Rook a d1, bishop c6, rook e1, queen f6, queen f2. Lots of moves here with no comment. I guess we're just kind of shuffling, and white gives you the c-pawn if you want it. And I guess you can take it. I don't see immediately why you can't, but I'm a bit nervous about white's ideas just to play, like, I don't know, rook d4, trying to come over to the h-file and mate me. Like, if we take on c3, does white have any ideas here to deliver checkmate? I really can't see anything immediate, so maybe it's okay. We just grab this pawn and try to hold on. Bishop d3, and yeah, we can't allow queen h4 with check like this, I don't think. Not with the queen coming into h7. So you played rook fd8. You said you weren't aware of how big of a blunder this was. So you said you saw queen h4. Good, I'm glad you kind of mentioned your thought process here. It's not like you missed queen h4. That's why it's so important to tell me, everyone, in these notes what you're thinking, because that's two totally different problems. If you don't see queen h4, or if you underestimate queen h4, two totally different things. So I have to know. So you saw queen h4, but you figured you could run away. My instincts tell me no, but let's see how this goes. Check, 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 and rook e3. I feel like white has better than that. So let's come back and take a look. So after rook fd8, so I think you mentioned the critical line here. Queen h4 check, king g8, bishop h7. Yeah, this is kind of a typical pattern. So check, king f8. The queen is still cutting you off. But what's the killing blow here? Oh, just rook takes d8, of course. Yeah, Yeah, just a simple little discovery, and the game could have been over very fast. But I guess white missed it, and they just chase you to e7, and then play rook e3. And now I think you're back in the game. And you mentioned you think some kind of tactic was possible. I don't see an immediate tactical blow for black. I would think about maybe playing queen d4, just trying to exchange queens. And if they don't exchange queens, then the rook's hanging, the bishop's pinned. So that could be a good option. You just play rook ac8, which also makes some sense. I don't see an immediate win here for white. They can't really move the bishop too easily unless they do so with check, and they missed their chance to move it with check. Do they maybe have a perpetual with queen h8? Or is it too late for that? After queen h8, king e7, queen h4. I'm trying to see if you could even get away with like f6 or something, trying to avoid the perpetual. But okay, queen f4, and here you saw the threat of bishop g6, but okay, I guess you just missed how strong this queen b3, queen takes b3 idea is, just attacking the rook, and if the rook moves, the bishop's hanging. If the rook moves to d2, there's back rank problems. Yeah, surprisingly, just being greedy and capturing this pawn looks like it leaves white with no real good answer. So you play queen f6, trying to trade queens. Queen b4 check. Okay, white avoids the exchange of queens. Now we're back to a somewhat normal middle game, although your king is on f8 instead of g8, but it's probably not a huge deal anymore. So rook d5, bishop e4, pieces come off, rook d8, more exchanges. Trying to think if this is the best way to handle the exchanges, but it seems pretty natural to me. We are up a pawn. Simplifications tend to make our king a bit safer. We can't really ignore the threat here of rook takes d8. So, okay, takes. Do we have to play bishop takes c4? It's probably the best move, I think. Just because if white takes back, they either have this isolated pawn or they have to concede the open d file. So let's see, queen takes e4. And now we're playing a queen endgame, a pawn up. Kind of an interesting situation that a lot of players don't deal with before a certain rating level. Not many games reach a point like this. So it's very important in queen endgames to always be aware of threats of perpetual check. That's a very common way for the defending side to make a draw. But if you can make sure your king is safe from checks and then start pushing your majority, you do have chances to play this for a win. So let's see, b6, yeah, that's just a mistake, I think. Because after queen a8 check, they just pick up the a-pawn. And you mentioned this. Let's see your comments here. You should have noticed his weak king on the back rank, put my queen in a position where I can check or mate him. So I guess what move are you suggesting here? Maybe like queen d7 or queen c7? I think those are reasonable moves. I was thinking just maybe g6, yeah, I think g6 is reasonable. But I think you missed his threat to just play queen a8, right? Because that just wins a pawn. And you'll practice against the engine. Good idea, very good idea, and everyone should kind of take note of this. When you blow an endgame like this, or when you have a slightly better or winning position that you fail to win, it's a very good idea to practice playing it against an engine over and over again. And if you fail to win it against an engine, flip the colors around. Let the engine show you how it's done. You can practice all of the engine's defensive techniques it used on you and see how the engine breaks it down. Very good idea. But okay, you lose the pawn. Should be a draw. Let's see if anything changes. So check, check. I don't see either side winning this. Okay, so again, this is a big decision, of course, to go to the king and pawn endgame, so I'm wondering if you calculated this all the way out. I don't see any mention of calculating it out, so that seems pretty scary to me. I guess here you don't really have too much of a choice, because you walked your king to e5, but you certainly could here just not play king e5, and nothing much would probably happen, and the game would probably be a draw. But let's see how this goes. Okay, I'm not sure why you're abandoning your pawns. I think the king has to stay with the pawns here, because if you abandon the pawns, it's pretty easy for white to target those pawns, is my feeling. I guess you're trying to go after the b3 pawn and make a passed pawn. So I like the ambition. I like that you're trying to play this for a win. I just feel like with the king being in the open, that's going to be really hard. And you certainly shouldn't abandon the g-pawn like this. Probably queen f6 here or something. So you play queen d3, you lose the g6 pawn. Is the game really over, though? I guess it is hard, because white has a very strong passed pawn, and it's hard to check their king, huh? Let's just see how the rest of this goes. b5, h5, okay. Yeah, it's never quite over in these endgames, because there's always those perpetual check threats to watch out for, but white's doing a good job here stopping all your checks. Yeah, this is over now. Let's see if anything changes. Nope. And it's a win. Okay, yeah, interesting game. You kind of blundered there with bishop takes h7. The opening was kind of questionable, giving away the strong dark bishop, doubling the pawns. That doesn't do any good. White gets a big space advantage, but you fought back. So that's good. And there was some craziness there that white missed with the bishop h7 discovery that would have won. And we ended up in this endgame where you should have been better, but then you just blundered the a pawn, and then you blundered the g pawn, and you lost. Overall, though, pretty understandable for a 15-minute game. And then you have this other game that you played against Theo, another member versus member game. You had the white pieces here, so let's take a look. So you went for the queen's gambit. We get a Slav defense. The exchange variation. Okay, that's okay. e6, e3. Check. So I'm not sure if this is so great. I think you're hoping there's some tactic here with the king and bishop, but of course there's just knight c6. Sometimes you can meet this with knight e5 and it works out pretty well for you, but not here, I don't think. Oh, I see, and you explain your thought process here. You thought following up with bishop b5 would win material, but not when they can take on c3 with check. Then again, I think it's reasonable. If you would have told me that you wanted to play this line just to provoke them into taking on c3 with check, I think that's very reasonable. Securing the bishop pair and getting another pawn closer to the center. I do think white's better here. I don't really like bishop b4 in this line, which kind of happened in both of these past couple games. I don't think it fits in with the plan of the Slav at all. Now, there are some lines, like the Cambridge Springs variation. I guess with the bishop outside the pawn chain, you could go for this, but just not in this specific case. You only really go for this when you can follow up with knight e4, queen a5, the bishop's locked out of the pawn chain like it is here. Just giving away the bishop pair just to bring another pawn closer to the center for white. I just don't really see the appeal for black. But okay, bishop b7, knight f3. Yeah, your plan doesn't work to win material, but isn't white better here? Seems pretty nice for white to me. a6. Although I guess that is kind of an issue. Maybe you should have retreated the queen earlier, because here I think you have to return the bishop pair. You can't play... Well, no, you could play queen d... Well, I'm trying to think. No, there's no way out of it. Yeah. Bishop takes f6 I don't like. Can't they take here with tempo? Just something to calculate. I guess you would have to look at this line. Like, after they take, what's happening here? If you take the rook, they take and save their queen. What else do you play? If you take their queen, they straighten out their pawns, and now the bishop has to still retreat. You always have to be super concrete when you're going to meet one threat with a counter threat. Like meeting a6 with bishop takes f6. There's always so many ways this can go wrong, and there starts to be so many pieces hanging, so many checks, captures, and threats. You have to be super concrete to play a move like that. And you mentioned you should have retreated the bishop. I'm not sure if that's possible. Maybe it is, though. I think I forgot. You can play bishop d3, I think, and there's no good discovery here, is there? Knight e5 maybe, though. Knight e5 possibly. And then just queen d1? I don't think you lose material, but black is going to get rid of your pair of bishops. So I thought bishop takes c6 might be a good answer. But okay, let's see how this goes. They just take back. Castle, interesting, just leaving the pin. But it's not going to survive there for long, just castles, and now you have to do something. So takes. Yeah, you said you're trading pieces off for no good reason. You don't want to trade the bishop for the knight, of course. I just don't see a great way to avoid it. Like I said, if you play bishop d3 then just knight e5, maybe bishop e2 now. I think this could be possible. And there's no knight takes d4 because just queen takes, huh? Or just queen takes d7 possibly, but then e2 falls. So just queen takes d4 wins. And knight e5, queen back. I think this is reasonable. Now, this is an interesting comment you made, and this is why I love seeing these comments. You often find it difficult to find another plan once the first plan you attempted failed. So you didn't really have a plan. Your plan was to win material, and then it didn't work. So that's just tactics. When we're talking about some operation to win material, that's not really a long-term plan or anything, to coordinate your pieces. That's just, you hope there was a tactic, and there wasn't. As far as longer-term plans go, I think trying to push for c4 could be good in a position like this. Again, you have to resolve the short-term tactics, but I think you want to push c4, because otherwise this pawn could be a target. It's kind of backwards on an open file. And then, I don't know, it'd be interesting. Black has this outside pawn majority, 2-on-1. You have a central pawn majority. Probably you bring your rooks to the B and C files, and it becomes a pretty interesting game. But let's see how the game actually went. So bishop takes c6, bishop takes, and queen back. Okay, rook a8, rook ab1. Yeah, not too easy to do much on the B file because the pawn's protected. And I think here black's better just because white has the only weakness on the board, this c3 pawn. But then again, if you play knight e5 or something, you could try to trade away this bishop and really weaken black on the B file. So let's see. b5, knight e5, I agree with that. queen c7, and I don't understand f3 too much here. I kind of get the plan that you want to play e4 and take over the center. To me, though, that doesn't make too much sense in this specific position. I don't see this leading anywhere other than maybe opening up this bishop. And if you trade away the bishop, I'm not sure there's going to be an attack. And in that kind of position, yeah, we're going to have the full center, but can't black just triple on the c-file? And this pawn's the only pawn that matters. I don't see us doing anything in the center. We're not going to attack the king with no minor pieces on the board, right? And this is where things start to become a lot more nuanced than just, follow the plan of the pawn structure. I know this is a plan in this pawn structure to play f3, e4. I just don't see it being effective here. I think black's just going to target our c3 pawn. So I had a couple ideas here. One is we could take on c6 and then play a4, or even better yet, what if we play a4 right now? Just as a thought, if we play a4 right here, how does black respond? Because if you take on a4, now we take on c6 and then take on a4, and now at least you have a target to go after too. Maybe you win c3, we win a6, and we equalize. That should just be a draw. Or if you don't take on a4, then what do? You can't play rook b8 yet, because your bishop's hanging. And otherwise, we can take your bishop and then take on b5 and win a pawn. So I think a4 here is a pretty interesting answer. I think that's my first instinct of what I would play in this position. But let's see, f3... queen g5, yeah, now there's kind of a new target here on e3. You play queen c1. I might even just play f4 at this point. I don't really see why not. But okay, queen c1, h5. I don't think black is going down the right path here. Black's not going to mate us on the king side either. I think they need to focus on this this weak c3 pawn. f4. No, I don't mind this move. You're attacking the queen, but you can't play e4 anymore. I don't think you really ever wanted to play e4. I know you think you wanted to, but I don't really see the benefit. But you're right, this does kind of stop your plan. So from that perspective, I guess you could give it a question mark if you played this move without considering the implications. I just don't really mind it. But let's see. Queen f5, queen d1, h4, rook f3. I'm not too sure why, but okay. f6, knight d3. The knight could come to c5 too and try to shut down black's activity on the c-file. That's another kind of plan. Rook h3. This isn't the right plan, I don't think. You don't want to put your rook on h3. It's kind of awkward there. h3 would be a minor problem. The hanging pawn on c3 is a bigger problem. Yeah, you have to defend your c3 pawn. I think just knight c5 looks reasonable to me. Also a6 is hanging. Okay, they don't go for it yet. Like queen f1, I guess you have to defend the knight, huh? And takes. Was there no possibility to play... I guess queen c2 looks a little scary, walking into multiple pins. But it might be a try to defend everything for now. So they win a pawn, and they start infiltrating. We do win the e6 pawn, though, but there's just going to be some problem here, isn't there? At first I thought bishop g4, but just the rook's hanging. You give it a question mark, you don't fully explain why, but this has to be bad for white is my guess. Also, your rook's kind of trapped unless we can take on h4 at some point. I think maybe just rook e8 here, just attacking the knight, attacking the e3 pawn. What happens on f5 there? That's interesting. If we play f5, maybe they're just like bishop e2 or something, going after your queen even more. And then if the queen moves away, f5 is possibly hanging. I don't know. I think black's much better, but there's still some some tactics to resolve. So let's see. Knight takes e6. They go for rook fc8 instead. So material's still equal for the time being. Knight c5, you shut them down on the file. Rook c6, f5. Yeah, the rook on h3 has always been kind of awkward. Now, if you could just play queen h1, queen e1 and take, maybe you get some activity, but I feel like your king is going to be weak, and the rook's hanging, and there's multiple problems here. Do they have to let you trade off that knight? And the second question is, do you want to trade off that knight? Because now you let all their pieces infiltrate, right? So after bishop d3, I mean, I guess what else is the question? Rook a1 looks super passive. So, okay, takes, rook c2, e2. Yeah, this is pretty scary. Yeah, tripled on your second rank. Okay, can you hold on here? I don't really see an immediate win for black. It's just kind of hard to imagine white being able to hold on. So let's see. Okay. Oh, well, yeah, now it's over. And there's no way to avoid that, is there? That's a good regrouping there by Theo. Nice job, Theo. Regrouping, trying to threaten queen or rook c1. And yeah, this rook is just so cut off from the action that it's almost like white's playing down a piece. Yeah, I don't like the whole like lift the rook to h3 idea in that particular position. The rook's just very awkward there. But overall, very interesting game. I hope some of those thoughts kind of helped out about where white could have improved.